I'm 82 years old, and 3 weeks ago a young doctor with tired eyes told me I don't have much time left. He tried to say it gently. I appreciated that. But there's no gentle way to tell a man he's almost out of road. When you get to my age, you think you've made peace with death. You've buried friends. You've stood beside your wife's grave. You've felt your own body thinning out, slowing down. But when someone puts a number on it, months, maybe less, it changes the air in the room. I went home that day and sat in my chair by the window. Same chair I've had for 15 years. The house was quiet, too quiet. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the life I built, and I couldn't stop asking myself why it felt so small. I wasn't a bad man. That's the truth that makes this harder to say. I worked hard, I paid my bills, I stayed married, I never drank too much, never raised a hand to anyone. From the outside, my life looked steady, responsible. But steady can become distant. Responsible can become absent. When I was 26, I got my first real job, engineering firm. Good pay for a young man just starting out. I had just married Clara. She was 23 with a laugh that filled a room. We rented a small apartment with yellow linoleum floors and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. We thought it was temporary. I told her, just give me a few years. I'll get us somewhere better. And I meant it. I worked late almost every night, not because anyone forced me to. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to be the man who moved up fast, who got noticed. I'd come home after 9, sometimes 10. Clara would be on the couch, book in her lap, pretending she hadn't been waiting. I kept dinner warm, she'd say. I'd kiss her on the forehead and tell her it was all for us. She'd nod. She always nodded. When our first son was born, I was 30. I held him in the hospital and felt something crack open inside me. He was so small, so fragile. I told myself right there I would give him everything I never had. What I didn't understand is that everything isn't what a child thinks it is. I missed his first steps. I was at the office reviewing plans for a project I can't even remember now. Clara called and left a message on the machine. He walked today, she said. She sounded proud, a little out of breath. I played that message twice. Then I went back to work. It didn't feel like a choice at the time. It felt necessary. Promotions were coming, raises, a bigger house in the suburbs, a yard. I told myself I was building a future for all of us. Years blur together when you live like that. Mornings in a rush, evenings half present, weekends catching up on paperwork or mowing the lawn, too tired to really listen. There were small moments, my son asking if I could come to his school play. It's just a short part, Dad. I told him I'd try. I didn't make it. Traffic, a late meeting. When I got home, he was already asleep. Clara had left the program on the kitchen counter. His name was printed in bold letters. I remember touching it with my thumb like that could make up for something. He stopped asking after a while. We had a daughter, too, 3 years younger. She used to wait by the door when she heard my car pull in. I'd step inside, briefcase in hand, and she'd wrap her arms around my legs. "Daddy's home!" I'd pat her head and say, "Give me a minute, sweetheart." I always needed a minute. To check messages, to wash up, to decompress. Minutes turn into years. Clara changed slowly. She never complained outright. That was her way. But her laughter grew quieter. She stopped waiting up for dinner. She'd leave my plate in the oven and go to bed early. When I'd slide in beside her, she'd be turned toward the wall. "Everything okay?" I'd whisper. "I'm just tired," she'd say. I thought tired was something we'd both get over once things settled down, once I reached a certain level, once the mortgage was paid off, once the kids were through college. There was always an once. In my 40s, I finally made partner. Big office, corner window. People called me sir. I felt proud. I drove home that night rehearsing how I'd tell Clara. I expected her to be thrilled. She smiled when I told her. She hugged me, but it was a careful hug, polite, the kind you give a colleague, not a husband. I'm proud of you, she said. That night, lying in the dark, I realized I didn't know what she did all day anymore. I didn't know her friends' names. I didn't know what books she read. We had become two people managing the same household. Our son left for college at 18. He packed his car quickly, efficiently. I offered to help, but he said he had it covered. Before he drove off, I shook his hand. My own son. I shook his hand because I didn't know if a hug would feel natural. Make us proud, I said. He looked at me for a second like he wanted to say something else. Then he nodded and got in the car. My daughter left a few years later. She hugged Clara for a long time. With me, it was shorter, not cold, just careful. The house grew quieter after that. Clara and I sat across from each other at dinner with nothing much to report. My stories were about contracts and deadlines. Hers were about neighbors I barely knew. One evening she said, "Do you ever think about what we'll do when you retire?" I laughed. "Retire? I'm just getting started." She didn't laugh. The turning point came on an ordinary Tuesday. Clara collapsed in the kitchen. A stroke, they said. Quick, merciful, the doctors told me. She was gone before I could say goodbye. I stood in that hospital room and realized I didn't know the last real conversation we'd had. Not about bills or schedules, about us. I tried to remember the last time I'd held her just to hold her. At the funeral, people told me what a devoted husband I'd been. He worked so hard for his family, they said. I nodded. I let them believe it. After she was gone, I retired within a year. There didn't seem to be a reason not to. I had the house, the savings, the success I'd chased for decades, and no one to share a morning with. I thought my children and I would grow closer then. I had time, finally. I called my son and suggested lunch. He was busy. We rescheduled 3 times before it happened. When we did sit down together, it felt like a business meeting. We talked about the weather, his job, his kids who barely knew me. My daughter visited more often, but there was a distance I couldn't cross. Once I apologized to her, out of nowhere. For what? She asked. For not being around the way I should have been. She looked at me kindly. You did what you thought was right, Dad. That's the problem. I did what I thought was right. Years passed like that. Birthdays, holidays. I was invited. I attended. I brought gifts. I smiled for photos. Then I went home to my quiet house. 3 weeks ago, when the doctor told me about the cancer, he asked if I had family to support me. Yes, I said, and it was true. They would come if I called. They would sit by my bed. They would handle the arrangements. But support isn't the same as closeness. Since that day, I've been thinking about time, not the big milestones, the small evenings, the school plays, the simple question from a wife, "How was your day?" The way I answered without really answering, I assumed there would be more time to slow down, more time to repair the distance, more time to sit at the kitchen table and really listen. There wasn't. What can't be fixed now isn't the missed promotion or the deals I worked so hard to close. It's the conversations we never had, the softness that never returned to Clara's voice, the way my son learned not to expect me, the way my daughter learned to make do with less. You can't go back and watch a first step. You can't re-sit in an auditorium and clap for a child who's now in his 50s. You can't tell your wife you choose her over the office when she's been gone 20 years. I have photographs. I have awards in a drawer. I have a house that's worth more than we ever imagined when we lived in that apartment with the yellow floor. And I would trade it, all of it, for one ordinary evening in that old apartment. just to sit on the couch beside Clara while she reads, to let the dishes wait, to let the future wait. If you're listening to me and you're still in the middle of it, still building, still striving, I'm not telling you to quit your job or throw away your plans. I understand the pull of responsibility. I understand wanting to provide. But don't confuse providing with being present. The people who love you will adjust to your absence. That's what hurts the most. They'll become strong in the spaces you leave. They'll stop asking. They'll learn not to need you in certain ways. And one day, when you finally have the time, you'll realize the season for some things has passed. I'm not angry at myself. Not exactly. I did what many men of my generation were taught to do. Work hard. Don't complain. Measure your worth by what you earn. I just wish someone had told me that love doesn't wait at the door forever. The doctor says I should focus on comfort now. Rest. I sit in my chair by the window and watch the light change across the floor. Mornings are slower. Evenings come quicker than they used to. Sometimes I speak out loud to Clara. I tell her I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. I don't know how many more sunsets I'll see from this chair. Not many, I suppose. That used to terrify me. Now it feels fitting, a quiet closing. If this means something to you, maybe just go sit in the same room as someone you love tonight. You don't have to say anything profound, just be there. Don't wait for once. I waited for once, and once never came.